Altenberg in Germany, the second weekend of the BMW IBSF Bobsleigh and Skeleton World Championships presented by Versicherung, and we are ready for the start of the men's skeleton competition. In the freezer, sub-zero temperatures, harsh cold all week long, plenty of snow around as well, making conditions very tricky for our 32 athletes ready to go. I'm Martin Having, with me Bree Schaff, and Bree, whether you're driving a bobsled, a skeleton or whatever, this is one of the toughest tracks in the business, and the hard ice isn't making it any easier.
Martin, it certainly is. This is a fun track, but one of the most difficult in the world, and it has one of the longest start ramps in the world. So start times will play a role here in the race today. At the top, you want to be early and quiet on all of these corners. Corners 1, 2, 3, just very subtly steering that sled. It has been sending athletes into the wall, so watch out for that. Corner 4 is the first big two-pressure corner. It wants to toss you on your shoulder and off into corner 5. That is a game changer for this race. This labyrinth is really flat. That's why that exit of 4 was so important. But corner 9 here, it's a 1.25 pressure corner, so the athletes have to hold their height to try and exit and nail this straightaway into one of the biggest kreisels in the world. Massive oscillations want to, again, toss you on your shoulder on the exit. Headed into corner 13 and 14, setting you up for another important straightaway in order to maintain your speed, if you have any, and had a good top half. 15, 16, 17, extremely high pressure corners. And again, you can see that biting athlete on the end out of the finish curve.
Start record held by Alexander Chechikov. That dates back 6 seasons now to when he was silver medalist behind one of Martin Stukur's many wins on this track. But the downtime, that was set by the world champion, Christopher Groothair. Groothair finished in 4th place in the overall World Cup standings this year. Martin Stukur's taking his 11th Crystal Globe at the end of the season as the World Cup champion. 2 of our podium finishers from last year are here. Axel Jung, who took the silver, hasn't raced all year. Alexander Gassner, who took the bronze, is here to defend that and try and overhaul Christopher Groothair, last year's world champion. In fact, 23 of the field of 32 athletes were in the race last year. It would have included Ander Mirambel, but unfortunately, the Spaniard, who is 38 next Wednesday, is not in the field. He's just let me know that he has pulled out with an injured left quad and focusing on trying to get healthy and the lead into Beijing. Now, of the athletes in our field, 23 raced here last year. 4 of them, including Mirambel, raced here in the previous Worlds in 2008. And if we talk about experience, Alexander Chechikov, Martin Stukur's and Thomas Stukur's, 11 World Championships each, that's 33 in total. The rest of the field combined have competed 58 times in World Championships, so they have more knowledge than the rest of the field in those 3 heads. And if you included Ander Mirambel, that's 43 total World Championships between 4 athletes. The Men's Skeleton World Championships for 2021 get underway with one of our 4 rookies, USA's Austin McCrary, the 31-year-old, making his World Cup debut, his World Championship debut here, rather, after making his World Cup debut in Europe this season.
Martin, you mentioned that experience, and that is going to be a big factor in this race, especially considering that the ice conditions have been harder and faster, and unlike many athletes have seen. Austin McCrary, this is his first World Championships, so new to this field, and considering this very much a learning experience for him.
Yeah, very much so. And when you talk about the track, Bree, you're absolutely right. It's been so cold, so fast all week that nobody's really got much of a handle on it. 3 days of training has helped a little, but they've seen a lot of different weather conditions. And he's going to give us an indication of how much control some of the sliders will have. We saw a lot of variation in the women's field. And Austin McCrary comes across the line with a 58.90. Now, if I hadn't tossed all my paper away, I could have told you how that compares to his training runs. But to be honest, comparing training and the race is always a tricky thing here. because A, the weather has changed a lot, and B, the track is always half a second quicker in race day trim than it is in training. No matter how fast you thought it was in training, somehow the track workers here make it even faster for the race.
Background music is apt there with Living on a Prayer, Martin. This ice is so smooth, so fast. It's already difficult to control, and when you add conditions like this, it's so glassy that it can be hard to get a grip, and if you steer too hard, you can put your sled into a skid.
Well, everybody thinks, yeah, ice is slippery, we know that, but it is the degree of slippery that is quite remarkable this year. Nathan Crumpton now, former US slider. This is his 4th World Championships. He did 2 as a slider for the USA. This is his 2nd now for American Samoa. His entire American Samoa World Championship history is on Altenberg. 18th place last year. World Championship best, though, 8th place in Innsbruck. Now, he's been struggling a little with injuries and a hip flexor in the last few weeks. He's been living out in Innsbruck at a 5:14 getaway.
Nate did tell me that his hip is feeling much better. He feels like he's more in the 95% range now, which is important on this track because it is such a long start. It feels like ages before you finally load your sled.
And for a sprinter, the hip even more important here because you're not running stood up. You're running bent over with your fingertips inches off the ground, which is not normal.
Absolutely. I was explaining that recently. When you are running in that position, you are risking, it's such an unnatural hinge that you risk a lot of injuries, hamstrings especially. When I try and explain injuries in the sport, it's often due to that running position, not so much crashes or bashing down the track.
Although, in skeleton, you never come away without a bruise or two, you know. We always say you steer with your head, shoulders, knees and toes, but those are also the bits that impact all the hard furniture around the track. 58.71, so 1900s quicker than Austin McCrary. Well, the snow that we had in the women's race seems to have dissipated a little. There is a bit of a wind, though, so that's still going to have an effect on some of the straights. You're not as sheltered as you might expect down there. Is that Anna Fernstedt there helping with the sled? She is a trooper, isn't she?
What a gem. And Martin, that wind does play a role here. Nate is making his way into Kreisel and trying hard to get that early entrance that makes it so much easier. He said he's been struggling with that exit of Kreisel, so I imagine he'll take that tap as opposed to the other options available.
Always love the face on the helmet. It looks like a man shouting in ecstasy, but actually it's probably his inner brain just going, no, as it sees everything rushing up towards him. Basil Sieber next for Switzerland, 23 years old, 2nd world champs for him. So again, his entire world championship career has been here. Finished in 29th place in last year's field. The Europa Cup champion, that's the junior level of sliding here in Europe a couple of seasons ago, has made 1 World Cup start.
Ooh, a big gust of wind tossing some snow on the track. It looked like the snow has died down, but like you said, Martin, that doesn't account for wind. And also, wind can affect you at the start here if you get a big gust that you're trying to run into.
Yeah, it looked like it was blowing off the roof, but there's plenty on all the roofs around here for it to be blown off by the wind. Out of corner 9, nice trip straight down the straight, little to the left of where he might want to be onto the Kreisel.
That was beautiful.
Well, he's trying to hold his
all
form,
around, entry and exit.
Bring the speed back a little. He's come from 56 to 3200s behind Nathan Crumpton. This could be close at the line for Basil Sieber. How close? 700s back. Well, listen, you know, from nearly 6/10 behind out of corner 9 to 700s behind. That's a remarkably good bottom half of the track, and he set it up with a good Kreisel.
Indeed, he found a lot of time. A lot of this for Basil comes down to his start. 5:36 compared to Crumpton's 5:14. That's tough to make up on a track. But this entrance to Kreisel, so good, so calm, right along the left wall. Early entry, that means that the pressure hits you more evenly. Makes it much easier to manage. Just a tutorial there on how to enter and exit Kreisel. So calm and collected, but just I don't think had the start time to hang with our current leader, Nate Crumpton.
23 years old, he's got time to develop that. What about Alexander Gassner, bronze medalist last year? Since then, he's had 2 World Cup race wins, his first 2 ever in successive weeks, and a 5:09 getaway. One thing that Gassner has got is confidence this year.
This is the first of our athletes that are going to be answering the question of, will this be a German sweep? Always a possibility on a German track, especially one as technical as Altenberg.
I've got to say, I think it's tougher this year. Absolutely not fit at the beginning of the season, hasn't been fit enough to compete all year, even in the World Cup. Just been doing some minor races. Best speed from Alexander Gassner, and the lead is building fast.
Those taps are not going to phase him. He's built so much speed coming into the bottom of the track that he's just going to continue to pull away.
Wow, 56.95. That is 900ths off the track. No, 1.09 off the track record, beg your pardon. So that is a good first run. Well, John Morgan very keen on the expression, I go with it. You can't win the race in the first heat, but you can sure lose it. And in the first run, it looked like Tina Hermann had given it away in the women's race. She was 4,500ths back, but came right back into contention. But this is a great shout for the medals right from the off for Alexander Gassner.
So much visible comfort there on his home track. Watch his chin profile, watch his shoulders, watch his ability to melt into the sled after those taps.
Well, here's also a World Championship medalist in the teams competition, but he'll be focusing on the main prize. And the main prize last year grabbed, surprisingly, by this man. In a press conference, one of the German journalists said, how much money would you put on yourself to defend? He said, I'm not a betting man, but if I had a little bit of money, yeah, I'd put some on me. The world champion in his 6th Worlds. Team gold in Whistler as well. He's had 2 silver medals before last year's gold.
Willing to place some imaginary money on himself. That's a reasonable, mild-mannered bet there.
Well, that's like me putting 10 of John Morgan's dollars theoretically on something. It's not a huge bet. Good exit at corner 5. You'll see the 4 rather. You'll see the Germans doing that very well. That's the key to their early speed.
It is. That's a flat portion of the track, and so you need that clean exit in order to manage the labyrinth in corner 9. Watch the German loops there in Kreisel. They know how to time those so well and not oversteer them.
And a bit of a flop out of the Kreisel. Still has the best speed, still has the lead. Not as big over Alexander Gassner. This could be close. Crozet's got his face buried in the ice. 2100ths, he keeps it alive. Christian Balder, the head coach of the German sliding for Skeleton, just whoa. Okay, 2100ths separate the top 2 at the moment. And those are our 2 medalists that remain from last year's podium.
Christopher had a big skid going into corner 15. It's hard to see there, but the track actually goes up and drops away, so you start to lose control if you don't have enough sticking power, enough G-force coming from 14. But this is a great shot, the overlap of Kreisel and how those oscillations correlate. And you can see him gaining speed.
Yeah, had a great entry. Be interesting to see as they come down out of here how much he then lost as a result of that flop off the exit. Well, his first ever World Cup win came here and a World Championship as well. It's clearly a track that plays well to the strengths of Christopher Groothaar. 5 sleds into the first of 4 heats in the BMW IBSF Men's Skeleton World Cup. We get to the 2013 World Champion Alexander Chechikov, now 35 years old in his 12th Worlds, his 3rd on this track alone.
498 start. We always expect a good start out of the Russian rocket here. And he's now had enough of a career and enough time here, and I believe he skipped a World Cup in order to get extra training during the ICC or Europa Cups here this season.
Yeah, the BFR team came here. They missed Samaritz, I think it was, and you know that's dedication. If you're going to miss a race, that's not what anybody really likes missing. But they needed more ice time. They felt they underperformed here last year, and look at the results. And of course, they came with coach Dirk Matchens, and Tretikov has been swapping between his old Schneider and a Matchens sled. I think he is probably on the Schneider because that's his comfort zone, but look at the result of the coaching. He leads by 1600ths. That is a great run from Alexander Tretikov, and he could be a big threat here for the gold medal.
And normally we might see 1600ths as a big gap, but of course this is a 4-heat race with a lot of track to cover, and especially as we saw in the women's race, we're going to see some variance here, heat to heat.
Finished only 8th place last year. That's what a difference that change of coaching has made. The German insider knowledge has really helped, and Alex is going to be like a sponge to that.
That skid right there was the only error I saw really on that run. It was overall quite a clean run. Beautiful Kreisel, the exit of Kreisel.
Well, Alexander Tretikov, 3 wins this season, 5th in the World Cup rankings. 4 wins this season, though, for the World Cup champion, Martins Ducours. He had a string in the mid-teens of this decade when he was unbeatable on this track. And he has rarely been on the medals since 2016. Hasn't had a win here in 4 seasons, a 5 flat at the start.
Martins Ducours has done a phenomenal job, not just making a career out of winning in skeleton, but maintaining physical and mental fitness to stay on top of the game. You cannot keep winning without a fabulous start time like we just saw.
6 World Championship gold medals, 1 silver in an uninterrupted streak from 2011 to last year when he was off the podium for the first time since the games in Whistler.
Interesting to see his approach to Kreisel compared to the Germans. He definitely steered a lot more there, and you could see that it pushed his waves way farther around the corner.
And these are skids and late exits from Martins Ducours. These are mistakes from Superman, 8500ths back.
Wow.
He has not put in a good first run. That is remarkable. Normally you go to his video to watch how it's done and then you try and copy him. Right now, he'll be looking at Tretikov's run and going, okay, what did he do? Now, with the Ducours brothers, it is always, and this includes World Championships, always about getting the equipment ready for next year, for the Olympics. But he did say, with all the wins this year, same as Francesco Friedrich, if you don't produce in the World Championships, it hasn't been a great season.
Right, and so many nations' funding is dependent on World Championships, but of course this is a COVID season where a lot of that is scrapped. So double pressure there. He just struggled with his rhythm at the bottom, even in Kreisel too, though. He just looked off, a bit aggressive with his steers, very uncharacteristic for him.
Uncharacteristically red in the face as well. I wonder if he's feeling a bit under the weather. Well, now, the caged tiger of the sliding world is Felix Kaysen, the 23-year-old former junior world champion. 3rd Worlds for him, finished in 5th place last year. And when he's released, just look at him go. One of the fastest starters in the business, 495, quicker than Tretikov.
That start certainly makes him one of the dark horses of this race. But that's a great shot of the snow that you're seeing drift into the track, and so it is important for the athletes to find a line that's not in those snowdrifts.
His problem is consistency. He is so eager to get going. Often he's really tense in the first heat and blows the race, then has a massive second heat to come back. He's got to overcome that. He can't be tight in this run. He can't be coming overly anxious to the track tomorrow. He's just got to pretend it's another training day. But Bree, that's so easy to say and so hard to do.
Indeed, he looks good, but he's just slowly bleeding time, and that comes with experience. 700's back, not bad. That is a great position to be in. Definitely not. I was going to call him a dark horse. That is no longer a dark horse of this race. He is in the mix.
Well, again, if he can produce the consistency, he's got the pace and the skill to beat everybody. But it's doing it over 2 heats has been a challenge to him. Doing it over 4, that's the real thing. He's won Junior World Championships. He's not yet a World Cup race winner even. He's had medals. But if he can hold on here and just keep his mind clear, he's got what it takes. It's just getting it out.
And that would be a big boost going into an Olympic season.
Oh my Lord, that would reignite. The Kaisinger momentum would just be unstoppable. So Felix Kaisinger has been, so Christopher Grote here, Alexander Gassner, and it is Alexander Chechikov who leads. Here's his young teammate Nikita Tregobov. He'll be 26 on Sunday. Will he have a medal as an early birthday present? Well, an Olympic medalist, but he's underperformed since the Games. 5:02, it's a so-so start for him. He should be faster than Chechikov still, but he isn't.
Oh, working really hard in corner 4 there and still hitting that skid in the 5.
This is Nikita's 6th World Championships, bronze medalist in Koenigsegg, silver in Whistler last year, 9th here. That's his worst ever World Championships result. And this year has been a really tough season of struggle for him. I don't think he's getting used to the new sled at all. Pretty sure that he is back on his familiar Schneider. But something needs to change. Tregobov is getting left behind. When we first went to the World Cup race in Sochi after the Games, Chechikov pointed at Tregobov and said, these young kids, they're just going to kill me. And at that stage, Tregobov was out starting him. He no longer is. Chechikov is just as fast as he was, but Nikita is struggling for form. He may need to learn that new sled in a hurry.
Tregobov just didn't nail the important parts of this track. Hitting before 5 is a problem because you have the long flat labyrinth, and then he had a skid out of Kreisel. Smash that first pressure, which you don't need to do, that's athlete's choice. Let it run a little bit in the second, but the problem is he got off rhythm and then released that steer too soon, broke into a skid on the exit. That's a long straightaway from then to 12.
Yeah, he's back on the Schneider sled, but that's not working for him either. He needs to be able to make the changes. So next up, Thomas Ducours. Like Alex Chechikov and his brother Martins, this is his 12th World Championships. Hasn't been out of the top 10 since 2009. 7th last year. Made his World Championship debut in St. Moritz back in 2007. And as you said, about his brother and about Chechikov, it's not just their longevity, it's how have they remained fit for so long.
It's a beautiful line there, 4 to 5. That's going to help him make up some time. He has dropped back 3/10 behind the leader, but his start was over a 10th behind our leader.
Just about stopped the bleeding. 3rd fastest sled into the Kreisel. Pretty clean exit. Here we go.
That runner drop is not a problem as long as you maintain control and melt into the sled. Don't let it skid.
He's got more control than Martins in the fast 3 corners at the bottom. He's got better speed, and he is ahead of his brother at the line. Now, as always, the 2 Ducours will have different setups on their sled, not because they don't talk to each other, not because they like different things, but because they will learn twice as fast as that if they have the same setup. And it doesn't work, or it does. So they will compare notes, and Martins may well move closer to what Thomas has got for the second heat.
And when you compare their speed, Martin's Dukers was 113.3, Tomas was 117. That's a big difference and a huge data point for whatever science experiment they're running at World Championships.
Well, you know, they want the medals, but they also learn. Just a late off 17 hits the wall. That's another few hundreds gone and another bruise earned. A good run from Thomas Dukers into 5th place. Brother Martins in 7th place, 4/10 back. So the first 10 sleds in our field of 32 are done. The first of 4 heats in the men's skeleton World Championships. 11th starter Marcus Wyatt of Great Britain. 3 British athletes in the field, 3 in the World Cup, all earning medals this World Cup season. We believe the first time that has ever happened in British skeleton, certainly for the men and for the women, I think. 5 flat, that's a good start.
A little bit of trouble there up top, though. Those corners, you want to be in early, and you saw his discomfort. He cranked that steer in corner 4. While he came out clean, that's going to drop a lot of time. Beautiful exit of corner 9 there. The name of the game is holding your height around that corner so that you can drop out and you don't hit that quarter of a pressure that wants to grab you on the end.
Decent exit out of the Chrysler as well. Still only in a 9th best speed. 3rd at the start. Coming back towards Martins Dukers. Normally, if you're right with Martins, you're right in the medals. He is in 8th place, but 1.45 back. There are some very big gaps in the skeleton field here. And Bree, it's so easy to make a mistake so early that just takes your heat away from you.
Yeah, even if you have a great start here in Altenberg, just there's so many long, flat sections that there's no room for error. And right here, right up top, he just missed, he went in too late to corner 2 there, dropped off the end, and it made it hard to get back. And now he cranks the steer. Do you see how the sled is skidding across this corner? That means he hit that pressure too hard at once. The ice is so smooth in Altenberg that if you're not absolutely fluid going in and out of those steers, you can put your sled into a skid while under pressure in a corner.
So Marcus Wyatt in 8th place after 11 sleds. Next up is Daniel Romanoff. World Championship debut for our World Cup debutant this season. His rookie season did 7 World Cup races. This is his first World Championships. Has never competed in the Junior Worlds, interestingly. But he's got potential for the future.
I think one of the grooves, Martin, is spitting the athletes late into corner 1, and that's where we're seeing some of this trouble. You saw him trying to fix right out of the grooves there where the sled was headed. Ooh, already off pace here, corner 4 to 5.
Yeah, really scrabbling for control, isn't he? The feet are out all over the place. A little bit better out of 9, but driving himself into the snow, you've got to avoid that. Lowest speed of everyone into the Chrysler.
His head is really high. He is desperately looking to figure out where he's going, anticipate his next steer. That is just the sign of a very anxious athlete that is not comfortable on this track.
Yeah, limited experience. When they came here during the World Cup season, the ice was very, very different from how it's been this week. So although the corners are in the same place, it sure isn't the same track that he had knowledge of before. 58.7, he's ahead of Nathan Crumpton by 100th of a second. 24-year-old from Moscow in his first World Championships. That was a training run that crept in, even here early, Bree skidding out of 4.
Yep, hitting that usual tap that pops you off your sled. Left leg up. It's just corner 4 has 2 pressures, and it's a matter of getting them just at the right time and not steering too hard. That's the fast line through 4. Anyone can go and smash those pressures, but it's a matter of hitting it at the exact right spot to accelerate the sled.
So Romanoff with lots to work on in the second heat today. Next up is the second of Great Britain sliders, 23-year-old Matt Weston. He was talking in the press conference about sitting in Innsbruck in the changing room, tied after the first heat of one of the World Cup races this season with Martin Stuckers. He said, the weirdest thing, you're the last two people to go, and there's only Martin Stuckers left. What on earth do you do in that situation? Well, the answer is he didn't end up winning the race. He won a medal the next week, and he comes in here for his second World Championships full of speed and confidence.
He's off to a literal great start, 5-flat start. Lines are looking pretty decent here, even though he's showing in the red 1300ths behind our leader, Alexander Tretiakov.
Now, he's one of a big bunch of sliders who came here at the end of January for the Europa Cup and Intercontinental Cup double race weekend. He won here the Europa Cup race. It's only his second year of sliding, and in fact, that was his first major international win. Across the line, how close is he going to be? 4500s back, 5th place, tied with Thomas Stuckers. Well, that's a slide that will give him lots of confidence. He had confidence coming in here. He was pretty relaxed, but feeling like you know what you're doing and then laying one down, Bree, you can probably tell us how different those two things are.
Oh, yeah. Once you get into the track and once it starts throwing variables at you, it is hard to stick to your plan. But as evidenced by his form, watch every corner. His head is down, his shoulders are down. Even if he's taking hits, he is committed to that form, which is unusual for an athlete that is this new to the sport.
Well, he finished last year's race in 15th place, 4th in the teams. He and Maddie Smith for a long time were in the medals. I think it was only the very final team that actually knocked them out on the final few runs. So he's been close. Next up, Florian Auer for Austria, 26 years old, 4th Worlds for him. You might possibly guess that he's in Innsbruck, his debut back in 2016. Let's see what he can produce here. He's got the experience, not a big starter, but this is a long enough track with enough people making mistakes that if you're clean, you can overcome a start, and that's what the German girls have showed us today. 5:24 the getaway.
He ran that sled quite deep, which sometimes, Martin, is not a great idea because that can kill your velocity if you're taking braking steps too far past the crest there. So far looking pretty good here, headed into Kreisel. We'll see how he handles those loops and the timing. That's a great exit.
And the reward is the speed, 5th best speed heading into the lower part of the track. Little nudge coming out of 14, robbed him of some speed, but it's a top 10 run so far, 57.62. So he started 5:24, 2600s behind Alexander Tretiakov, comes down 1 second behind him, and that's kind of the multiplier. 3 times his start disadvantage at the bottom. So that run may be par for the course for Alexander, Florian rather.
He's got great form. He's committed to his lines. Up top, they're just trying to edge off the wall. Those corners are sent. There are 3 right-hand corners, and they're nudging you left each time. And so it's about leaning just enough to stay off, not steering too hard, and managing that top with as little input as possible.
Well, next up for Great Britain, Craig Thompson, the 3rd of our medalists this season for GB Skeleton. All 3 of them claimed World Cup medals. For Craig, 2nd World Championships, finished in 20th place last year. Silver medalist in Innsbruck just a couple of weeks ago, behind the winner Alexander Tretiakov, and a big boost for his morale.
Team has been shuffling. Oh, big hit out of 4. Caught that pressure way too late on the end of the corner. That's the risk you take when you're trying to let it run there.
Well, he outstarted Tretyakov, but the speed has gone away. 3/10 back, only 10th best speed at the Kreisel. Huge waves, and flocks out.
Oh, no.
This is going to leave him right at the tail of the field. First, third, 8th, 9th. You can see him being in 12th, 13th at the line. Maybe enough for a top 10. It is just enough for a top 10. 57.98, but again, it shows how easy this track is to make mistakes on. It's not that he doesn't know what he's doing, it's just that there are so many potential hazards on this track.
There's so many straightaways to collect yourself and try and gather your mind and get it together again, but he just seemed to hit all of those traps between 4 and Kreisel. Like, that is a big hit that sent him nearly fully off his sled, and onto his shoulder. So that right there is a huge speed loss, multiplied only worse by what happened out of Kreisel, where he caught that last bit of pressure. If you push the pressures those 3 distinct ways, if you push them too far around the corner, then you get a lot of height on the end there that sent him on his shoulder and into the wall.
And of course, he's been beaten around there, so it's just like taking a punch to the head and then trying to focus for the next corner at, what, only 65, 70 miles an hour head first. Next up, Vladislav Heraskevich for the Ukraine, 22 years old now. This is his 4th World Championships. Debut in Koenigsegg, he was 24th. Since then, the last 2 Worlds in Whistler and Altenberg, he's finished in 14th place.
5:25 start time, so he'll have a lot of work to make up for that. But he's a strong, solid athlete, and weight does play into the sport of skeleton.
Yes, Dad Mikhail, who's
Beautiful
also his coach,
exit.
told me that over the summer a couple of years ago, he lost about 14, 15 kilos to try and get more of a sprinter and less of a mixed martial arts power lifter physique. Try and take a little bit of his body out of the equation. Good speed, 8th best.
That's definitely the approach that track and field athletes take. They certainly like to be a bit lighter, and skeleton does have an important sprint start, of course.
This is going to be a top 10 run for Vladislav Heraskevich, and across the line, 9th place,
Hey.
60 seconds, 1 second back rather, 57.58. Now, bearing in mind, he gives away 3/10 at the start to the fast starters. He's come down a second back of Alexander Tretyakov. That was a good-looking first heat from Vladislav Heraskevich. And you know what? You know, he's got courage. He holds his form no matter how out of shape the sled gets, and just overrides all the fear in the brain going, save this. He just lets it go.
Martin, that is so much of the sport of skeleton you just described there. Despite all of your systems saying Mayday, Mayday, is you are fighting those instincts to say, no, 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 we're cool. We've got a mile of track here, stick to it.
Well, he posted a picture on social media the other day of him with his sliding suit off and just a raw red arm where he'd been battered by the wall. And he won't be alone in that. Next up for Austria, Sammy Meyer, 21 years of age. Sister-in-law Elizabeth slid this morning. Brother Benny slides in the 4-man over the weekend. Second World Championships for him. He got a bronze medal in the Junior Worlds in St. Moritz in January. And he was bronze in Innsbruck 2 weeks ago. The end of the season has been good for Sammy Meyer.
Nice, quiet top portion of the track, headed into corner 4. We could hear him steer that first pressure. That tap, it wasn't as bad. So the balance there is trying to figure out how to steer it just enough. You don't want it so clean and steering so hard that you're scrubbing time, scrubbing ice, and slowing yourself down.
13th fastest start, but 11th best velocity in the start trap, in the speed trap, and he's now up to 8th best out of the Kreisel. Look at the speed.
Good times. He smashed those steers in the Kreisel. That was some of the lowest oscillations that we've seen through there yet.
Oh, a little offline, 15 into 16, big oscillations, hits the wall hard across the line. 57.25, 100th behind Nikita Tregebov, but he might have been a lot closer to Thomas Dukors and Matt Weston if those final three left-handers had been just a little cleaner. And that's the bit he'll remember most, because those were the last couple of corners.
For sure, the key there is getting early, and if once you get off rhythm and you're slamming into that corner late, that G-force hits you all at once, and there's so much G-force down there at the bottom of the track. But back up to this straightaway, he managed that really well. There's still snow in the straightaways, so it makes it easy to break into a skid. That's where form is critical.
Yeah, 15, 16, and then 17 throws him out against the wall. Another bruise for the collection. Yeah, a shame. He could have been maybe a 10th, maybe 2 ahead. Next up, Mattia Gaspari, bronze medalist last year in the teams competition with Valentina Margaglio for Italy, and that was a fantastic team race. 26th in the overall race. He'd only been back in World Cup racing for 1 weekend by that stage, recovering after a calamitous set of injuries before Pyeongchang Olympics that left him out of the sport for 2 years.
Well-managed corner 4, but we could see him steering, and the problem with that, Martin, is if we can see it as an audience, that means that he's being a little bit too aggressive to work on that line.
6/10ths back, but good speed in the Kreisel. This might be a top 10 run as well. 6th best speed for Mattia Gaspari. His 5th World Championships, his best. Koenigsegg, he was 9th. Losing a little bit back down at the bottom. This is like Sammy Meyer's run. Where does he end up? 10th place at the line, ahead of Vladislav Heraskevich. You'll take that. I think that's a pretty good-looking run for Mattia Gaspari. 57.52 leaves him in 10th place off a 13th best start.
Yeah, with that 5:20 start, just an overall clean run. That's what that goes to consistency right there, just keeping it clean enough. Entering Kreisel here, watch the timing of his steers. So he does oscillate a bit more, but that's okay. You can let that run in Kreisel. You're not gonna lose as much time if you can be a bit freer through there. Finding a bit of the snow drifts through the straightaway, and then here's a great shot of catching a little bit too much pressure on the end of 15. Those are those 3 left-hand corners that hit high pressure on the entry.
Well, Mattia always says, second run. We've got 2nd, 3rd, and 4th run to go here. Dr. I says hi, by the way, Brie, the 2008 world champion, Kristen Bromley. Ronnie Alderset next for Switzerland. 19th of our starters already. Alexander Tretiakov, the race leader, and Ronnie with a 5:06 start.
Excellent. Well, hello to Dr. Ice. Glad to have him tuning in and supporting the sport as much as he does. So many of his sleds out here on the field.
Exactly. Coaching from home, watching the lines, and then giving the feedback on WhatsApp, one of the greatest coaching tools since video iPads were invented. Long skid through the snow for Ronnie Alderset. Pays for it, only the 13th best speed off a 9th fastest start.
That sound right there, Martin, that is the sound of a helmet on the ice, like a Star Wars TIE fighter. That was the story of my life in skeleton, and why the transition to bobsled was such a blessing, being able to see where I was going.
Yeah, skeleton helmet on the ice hurts a lot more in bobsleigh than it does in skeleton, but it is less frequent. I'll give you that, definitely. Well, 13th at the line off the 9th best start from Ronnie Alderset. And that wasn't as bad a run as it might have been. This is his 4th Worlds. In Winterberg, he was 25th. In Eagles, 23rd. In Whistler, 28th. So he's looking first and foremost to make the cut.
Long trip through the snowdrift there, which probably cost him a bit of time as well. But commits to that great form despite breaking into skid.
To be hanging out in 13th place with all our top World Cup sliders gone, I think that's a very good first run from Ronnie, and he should gain a lot of confidence from that. Our Olympic champion, Sun Bin-yoon of Korea, 26 years old in his 5th Worlds. Only 6th here last year, and because of various problems with COVID testing and getting in and out of bubbles, had only 1 day on ice, last day of training, so he is very short on experience this year. 4.91, apparently still very quick at the start though, Brie.
And that is a great start for him, and he is coming out on fire. I cannot imagine, that to be expected with only 1 training run here. He's obviously an extremely talented athlete, but this is a track that takes runs, especially when the conditions are such that they are colder and harder ice than anyone has seen this season.
Yeah, it's almost like he's never slid this track before. He's got that memory of it, but it is so different to everything that his instinct tells him needs to be done. From the fastest start, he'll be down at the bottom of the teens after this run. And matching even last year's 6th position might be a struggle. Well, there's coach Richard Bromley, Kristen's brother, with not much you can do about that. And they were expecting this to be a tough weekend after all the issues they had. And the problem actually is that they went to Koenigsegg last week to race, and he didn't actually even get a race there. And they're trying to keep their track quota up so that there's no problems with qualifying in next year's World Cup and making the games. So Olympic champion.
Those steers in 4, and that's where it all started there. So he took that hard hit off of his sled on his shoulder, and that is way too much time to make up at this level. But we've talked about, Martin, the name of the game in a COVID season is adaptability, but adapting to only 2 training runs prior to a World Championships, that's a lot to ask.
He's a determined kid, and his hero is Iron Man. He will do exactly what it says on the tin and get back on and get at it. Alexander Chechikov leading the first of 4 heats in the men's skeleton World Championships. Fastest 20 sleds down. Next we get to Austin Florian of the USA. 3rd World Championships for him. He was 8th in Whistler, and he finished in 22nd place here last year.
I talked to Austin's coach and Olympic bronze medalist Matt Antoine yesterday, and he said what they're looking for out of Austin this weekend is a top 15. That would be a great starting point for an athlete that's still really getting to know the sport and getting to know the World Cup Tour.
Well, his progress in Altenberg last year was noticeable. He was 22nd in the men's race, but combined in the team's race finished in 7th place, so even that extra little bit of experience helped.
So far he hasn't lost a ton of time. Hit massive pressure though in corner 14.
Yeah, and there's the speed gone away. He was in 7th place going into 14, and at the line, 10th place.
Right.
Take that. Take that. It looks like a bit of a scramble, but he held the speed. And, you know, sometimes, like you said in the women's field, sometimes the wild rides can be fast. And actually, Kristen Bromley was the king of that. It always looked like a big crash, and sometimes it was, and sometimes it was the fastest thing you've ever seen. And I could never really decipher the difference.
And he did buy himself some wiggle room with that 4.99 start there to help keep in the mix, but his speed just didn't have it at 112.6 kilometers an hour, and that comes from experience. That comes from timing those steers in Curve 4 and in Kreisel.
Well, 5th best speed, 10th at the bottom, and if he hadn't had that problem, 13 and 14, all of these corners, and that's the exit of 15, would have been a lot tidier and a lot faster. And we've seen that you can pick up 2 tenths down there at the bottom with a good exit of 14. So lots of positives for Austin Florian. Next up, Jisoo Kim for Korea, 12th here last year. He was 14th on his debut in Whistler. This is his 3rd Worlds. But again, the Korean season has been short. They've spent a lot of time in Pyeongchang, very little time anywhere else because of the COVID travel restrictions.
But if there's anything that Pyeongchang trained them for, it is the world's coldest, hardest ice. And so that might be one of the very few advantages to missing so much of the season, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, the Olympics were pretty brisk, weren't they? And long skid down the straight.
You let that second pressure fly, and well timed, just takes a little bit of a tap. All things considered, that is not a bad exit of Kreisel.
Gets a good exit out of 14, but only the 19th best speed. Let's see if he can pull himself up from 20th place on the splits. 18th at the line, so he got ahead of Nathan Crumpton and Daniel Romanov. So 2.06 seconds back. And that's the first of 4 heats. That tells you what a wild track this is. It would be unusual in a 2-heat World Cup race to have the 18th starter, never mind anyone else, 2 seconds off the lead. That's snow race kind of results.
It is. That shows you how much variance there is here. That corner 4, oh, even had a foot on the ice. This track, it's all about 4 in Kreisel and minimizing damage everywhere else as you're just getting beaten into corner and wall after wall.
Kristen Bromley claims that he was super efficient riding on the edge and not wild. Aha. That's the way it looked to me as well. Next up, Seung-Hui Jung from Korea. 3rd World Championships for this 21-year-old. He too made his debut in Whistler, which for so many years was home camp for the Koreans. 9th place then, 16th place here last year. And that's another strong start, 5:01.
And aside from the home track advantage that hosting an Olympics gives you, the boost that it gives to a program is huge. And we see that here. Oh, trouble out of 4 there. But we see that with the Korean program and how much more is invested in these athletes. When you have an athlete as young as this with a 3rd World Championships under his belt now, that's great momentum for their program.
Long run down the wall into the Kreisel. One of the lowest speeds we've seen. So Jung making a lot of contact with the wall. 9th fastest start, although he was only 300ths off Alexander Tretyakov. There's so many quick starters at the top of the pile. And he is going to be struggling to make the cut overnight. 21st at the moment, 58.75. He's ahead of Switzerland's Basil Sieber and the USA's Austin McCrary. And there could be an awful lot of changes in the second heat, which comes up about half an hour after the first one finishes. So it's definitely not done yet.
Falling off of corner 4. So you see, did you notice how there's that appearance of falling as opposed to under pressure and control? And so that scrubbing down the ice, it's a lot of time lost on top of popping off of his sled.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal, this track, physically as well as mentally, or mentally because of physically, perhaps. And he took a lot of hits. For the Bobsleigh Federation of Russia, Yevgeny Rukoshwev, 21 years old, 2nd World Championships. He is our reigning junior world champion, which is why BFR have another athlete in the field above their normal allocation and a 4.99 getaway. You can imagine that that probably helped him in St. Moritz.
Beautiful exit of corner 4. He was working for it, but that seems worth it at this point in the race after you're seeing athlete after athlete come out on their shoulder from corner 4. Needed to hold his height a little bit longer out of corner 9. That's why we saw that runner drop and that little bit of a rise.
Amazing how different the Russian athletes look now through corner 4, that they've got a German teaching them how to navigate it. Still in the top 4, Yevgeny Rukoshwev. 21-year-old junior world champion finished in 13th place here in last year's Worlds on his debut. And he went from 4th to 7th in the final 3 corners. But that is in there and swinging.
That is a great first run. And not on my list of dark horses. That is a surprise to see, but goes to show you, like you said, when you've got a German coach showing you the German lines on this track, that is a big advantage.
And a 4.99 getaway doesn't hurt either, but he got out of 4 nice and clean. And so all of that start speed was still in his hands as he came here out of 9. Managed to stay out of the snow. And look, exit of 14, again, the key corners pretty much went well until 15, where he skidded in a bit. So Anna Mirambel just left me a message a little earlier, had a chat with him. He has pulled out with a left quad injury, so does not make his 11th World Championship start. That brings our field from 33 down to 32, so move on to Amadeo Bagnis, the 21-year-old Italian. Second World Championships for him. He's done 3 Junior Worlds as well. He was in 31st place in last year's race.
Sending best wishes to Ander Mirambel. That is such a bummer of news. I know he was really hoping to compete in his 11th World Championships. We started at similar times, and it's great to see him still at it here.
Yeah.
They're nearly 3/10 behind the pace already.
Yeah, Bagnis with a pretty decent start, only 1600s away from the leader, but now 3800s back. 14th best speed, and he is, what, our 26th athlete, so that's right in the middle of the field. And this could see him move up the order a little bit. 18th at the start. Currently top 12 on the splits. Decent run through the final 3 corners. How close to the top 10? In the top 10. He's a little bit of a mercurial
really interesting shuffling here.
Yeah, little bit of a mercurial slider. He can have shockers and he can have some really promising runs. And that definitely comes out of the latter category. That was a really promising run.
That was, and nothing will teach you to temper your mercurial nature than a 4-heat World Championships, because that is the same format as the Olympic Games, and consistency, of course, is key.
But of course, if you get tense before the first heat like Felix Kaisinger, that's 2 days you can get tense before the first heat. So, yeah, you're right. But that's a great confidence builder. Top 10 for a man who finished 31st last year. I'll take that any day. Now, Mihai Pakianu has been in and out of the World Cup, sharing duties with teammate Sebastian Inaki this year. Mihai, though, in his 2nd World Champs. His first, Innsbruck, 2016, so 5 years ago, when he was only 16 years old. 21 years old now. Let's see what he can produce here.
I was going to say, Martin, I was trying to do those quick calculations, because this is a great example of the youth program in skeleton and the Youth Olympic Games and what it's done for the sport worldwide. Mihai is one of the athletes that I actually got to coach as the IBSF Emerging Nations skeleton coach. He's really talented, listens really well. He's got a bright future ahead of him.
Trains a lot with Romania's bobsledders, because his dad, Julian, is the bobsled coach. And in fact, you almost stepped in on the back of a 4-man sled in last year's World Cup races at one of the weekends. 26 speed, though. 22nd fastest starter. He's working a little too hard for the control.
Ooh, late into 15, 16, 17 there. Big hit on the end. Nope, manages to avoid it, but lost a lot of time. And Martin, I think a lot of that as well, when we go back to the replay and watch Kreisel, he just seemed a bit aggressive and a bit confused with his rhythm and timing of those steers.
Well, I didn't look to see when was the last time he raced here in Altenberg. Not sure if he maybe came here for EC and ICC a couple of weeks ago, but still trying to find the lines, isn't he?
He is, but long, bright future ahead of him. And that's a great example of how much pressure is in the beginning of corner 16 there when you go in late.
Well, 5:23 start. He definitely needs to find a little more speed at the start if he can. But then everybody does, I guess, if your name's not Tretikov or Kaisinger. For Canada now, Mark Lynch, 33 years old, second World Championships for him. He made his debut in Whistler back in 2019. He was 23rd then and 7th in the team's competition. Let's see what knowledge he's got of this Altenberg track. It is relatively limited, 5:28 the getaway.
Little tap there from 1 to 2. And the Canadians, like the Americans, are trying to find their rhythm. That's a beautiful exit of corner 4 to 5 there. Well done. But like the Americans, missed the first half of Tours, so they don't have the same amount of race rhythm coming into World Championships that the rest of the field does.
And racing in Europe really for the first time at this level. And the Canadians without a national coach here as well, so they're kind of working with other nationalities. Jeff Payne helping out a bit, so too Joe Cicchini. 8th best speed. This is a good-looking run from Mark Lynch. That's a really decent run. 15th best, 57.62. Yeah, he did a little, but top 15.
That was looking to be a really good run there. Really clean lines, just well managed, good form.
Steering in the right places is so much a secret, like on every other track, but here it just pays dividends.
Great exit there, and notice his shoulders coming back down. Even if you hit a bump in the ice, which, how dare I say that in Altenberg, because this is some of the smoothest, glassiest, fastest ice in the world. In fact, so smooth at times that it can be confusing if you oversteer and break into a skid.
For Canada, Mark Lynch has just come down in 15th place. What about Kyle Murray, 31 years old, World Championship debut for Kyle. Couple of Intercontinental Cup races last week. His first races since the last World Cup of last season. Wasn't in the World Championships in February, so it's been 12 long months. He's had 2 races.
Like we've talked about, racing is a skill, it's a rhythm, and to get used to that kind of pressure, not just the pressure of the race, but the pressure you put on yourself, the more you can get into a routine, the better it goes. And so that is tough, especially for the athletes all across the field that have popped on and off World Cup races this season.
And you can't just go to a track and keep going down. It just doesn't have the same effect as going to different tracks and going down. So Kyle struggling for control, particularly as the speed rises. You can see him getting beaten around by the track. So 59.04, that was a pretty wild ride for Kyle Murray. Not at all comfortable. I don't know that they've got a physio with them, but he might need to borrow some time from somebody else's after that. That was a pretty physical ride down, Bree.
It was, and we saw his head getting tossed around a lot, which we don't often see, especially coming out of corner 14 there as he went down into the straightaway. Just so tense. And once you start taking those hits and you start a wild ride, your body naturally tenses up, and then it just snowballs from there.
And there's nothing you can do about that. You know, that is self-preservation, overriding everything your conscious brain is trying to tell your body to do. The unconscious is just tightening everything up, which of course perversely is the last thing you need either to drive the sled or to survive the impacts with the wall. You need to be like Jello. So 28 sleds down, our 29th starter, Jeff Bauer for Luxembourg. 3rd World Championships for the aerospace engineer from Ohio. Raced here in January in the EC and Intercontinental Cup. Made his World Championship debut in Koenigsegg, raced last in Whistler. Wasn't here last year.
This is Jeff Bauer's first year competing in Altenberg, and he is one of the athletes that I coached as the IBSF Emerging Nations coach, and he's got a great attitude, really eager to learn, unfazed by hits and bumps and bruises, and just excited to be out here racing. He has advanced degrees in physics and engineering, and he's definitely learning tangibly on the ice all of the effects of physics.
Well, listen, if you can race the World Championships in Whistler, then you can race the World Championships here as well. They're equally as intimidating. 26th best speed, 29th at the start. Let's see if he can get close to Mihai Pakianu, who's currently the Lanterne Rouge at the tail of the field. Little wild through the fast corners where you need to be smooth as silk. And across the line, 59.97.
59.97, the time of the first heat, and 29th place.
So how
you can
far
see Jeff's
behind
discomfort
Mihai?
kind of compound there.
Yeah. Have to paddle the sled up to the finish. They've left a lot of snow there on the outrun to slow the sleds down because the track is so fast at the moment.
So that hit off of his sled is when things really start to tense up. And if you look at the distance between his shoulders there in the top, in the very front of his sled, that makes it even harder to control. When you're that separate from your sled, the skid only gets worse and it's harder and harder to get back.
Well, from the oldest athlete in the field to the youngest, Colin Freeling for Belgium, 18 years old, making his World Championship debut. Was a youth Olympian in St. Moritz last February, finished in 10th. He's done 3 Junior Worlds and raced here in the Europa Cup and Intercontinental Cup in January. 5:42 the getaway. He's really only in his second season of sliding. And Dad Stepan is the head of the Belgian Federation, a former bobsledder himself.
The field still chasing Alexander Treshikov, the current leader. Time to beat 56.58. We're well off of that pace, but again, like you said, Martin, this is a young athlete getting to know Altenberg very well right now.
Yeah, so many different stories here, aren't there? There are those who are, you know, with all the experience to chase for the medals, and there are those who are on the foothills where a dozen years and more ago, the Trechikovs and the Ducours were learning their trade. 29th at the bottom, 59.69, so he's just pipped Jeff Bauer. So our two age extremes, about as far from the median as it's possible to get in either direction, are battling for positions, 29th and 30th. And for Colin, it's all about experience. Youth Olympics was a big experience. First World Championships, big experience. And whether or not there's a spot for Belgium in the Olympics remains to be seen on the quotas. But if he gets the chance to go just to experience that as well, that will be a big part of the learning curve for this young man.
And you bring up a really important point there, Martin, for these smaller nations at the end of the list. The criteria and the competition to make it into the Olympics is different now, so it is cutthroat these days.
Katsuhiro Koshi lays the sled on the ice, not for a Korean slider, but for an Australian. This is Nick Timmings, one of identical twins. Dean competed in the Worlds in Innsbruck and Koenigsegg. Nick made his debut in Winterberg 2015, so he was the first of the two to start a Worlds, but his most recent was in Whistler 2019. And he can converse fluently with Koshi-san because both the brothers, being part Japanese, spend a lot of their time in Japan as well as in Australia. Fluent Japanese speakers.
So many of these nations now are in a similar boat, Martin, where they, like Canada, out on tour without a head coach. And so there's so much camaraderie right now as everyone just battles so many unknowns in a really, as they say, unprecedented season.
Yeah, absolutely. But the brothers are being used to doing that on their own. You know, they're occasional World Cup performers and spend a lot of time in the Intercontinental Cup, the lower tier. But that didn't start until January. So for Nick Timmings, it's been a long while since he was on ice. 17th best speed, 27th at the start. Looking at 24th, 23rd, 21st at the line. That's a really good bottom part of the track. We've seen so many runs, Bree, from 13 and 14 just come completely unraveled. His stayed together and the speed is the result.
Yeah, Nick is talented. He's an athlete that I have coached in the IBSF Emerging Nations program. And like you said, it's just tough when you're out on your own. And normally they would be doing America's Cup, but that was a bit more difficult this year. So Europe was the place to go to if you want to be sliding.
And often the brothers will be helping each other out. It's unusual to be out on your own. Down there into 15, little tap on the way in, but he somehow managed to keep the speed up. That worked well for Nick Timmings. And our final slider, I'm not sure what the Ghanaian for it is, or the Dutch, but happy birthday to you, Akwasi Frimpong. The second World Championship appearance for the athlete from Ghana, who lives in Salt Lake City, Utah. Made his debut in Koenigsegg in 2017. Raced here in January in the Europa Cup and the Intercontinental Cup. So he has only been here once in his life, and that was a couple of weeks ago. He's got a dozen runs under his belt, 5.43, and I know whatever ungodly time it is in Salt Lake City, his wife and daughter will be watching.
It is so great to see Akwasi out here. Well-managed corner four. Those are the time steers that we want to see out of Akwasi. He's struggled this season with injuries the entire way, and so to see him hit that start that hard with that kind of turnover is great to see. I know it's been a lot of learning, and like you said, it's his first time in Altenberg, and what a time to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, started being coached by Zach Lund, another Salt Lake City resident. Currently being coached with the Russian team, so Sergei Chudinov, Dirk Matchen's trying to put their influence in as well. And as he said this morning, rise and shine, birthday day. What a day to represent your continent. So a 60.74 for a 0.75 for Akwasi. And he is down and done for the first of what will likely be 3 heats. 44th in the field in Koenigsegg on his debut. We've only got 32 sleds here today. That shows you what a different World Championships this is. Nearly a quarter of the field from a Koenigsegg race missing. Of course, Koenigsegg was the year before the Worlds, before the Olympics, as this is, so it's an equal parallel maybe.
And Akwasi is not worried about the downtimes right now. He wants to learn. He is absorbing so much every season. And I'll tell you, it is great to see the timing of his steers. That is something that he struggled with in the past. And these are big improvements.
And
Shanti is his daughter.
Little daughter Shanti is watching at home. I guess she, 6 a.m., 6:30, yeah, she probably is. Try and keep her asleep, that would be the trouble. So Akwasi Frimpong is down and done. That means our entire field has completed 1 of 4 heats. Alexander Chechikov of Russia is our race leader. And like in the women's race, we have a BFR athlete 700ths ahead of a German athlete after the first heat. So a 700th lead for Chechikov. Behind him, though, they are racked up. Kaisinger second, Groothair the champion third, Gassner the bronze medalist from last year in fourth, ahead of Thomas Ducour's Matt Weston, tied for fifth. Yevgeny Rukoshwev, the rookie, ahead of teammate Nikita Tregobov, Sami Meyer and Amadeo Banis. I'm missing someone here, aren't I? Yes, we've got 10 names down and haven't got to Martins Ducours. When have you ever seen Martins Ducours 8,500 back in a decade? Somebody's going to need to do a lot of digging. Top 20 rounded out by Marcus Wyatt. 12 sliders behind, all need to try and find a place in that 20. Nick Timmings and Kim Ji-soo are probably the closest to it. Maybe Dana Romoff and Nathan Crumpton if they get a couple of good slides this afternoon and tomorrow. And unfortunately not making the start in what would have been his 11th Worlds, Spain's Andamir Ambel. One heat done, 3 to go, the second of which comes up very shortly indeed. Join us for that as we return. Martin Haven, Bree Schaff and the IBSF TV crew. Until then, stay safe. We'll see you for more men's action coming up soon.
Come on.